And I'm really glad you pointed out the kind of Christological quality of Frodo, um, as the one who takes up the ring, which is not too dissimilar to a cross. And then he bears that through the journey, and he's not the strongest. He's not like Boromir with the big, hardy warrior body. He's just a little hobbit, and there's nothing particular about him except from his heart and his courage and a little bit of exploratory spirit that allows him to take on this burden that is so much greater than him. And this quote that I included in the one of the postings, he says, "I know what I must do, but I'm afraid to do it." And it's so like that place of doubt, that place of like wrestling with God, wrestling with destiny, wrestling with our own purpose, struggling to realize it, and indeed calling on aid. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about Tolkien's universe is even though we're thrown into the most difficult quest of our lives, which actually seems like an impossible task, there are these helpers that come along the way and give gifts and give guidance at different moments. And we see that in the elves and so on. And ultimately that speaks to, I think, the spirit of fellowship, which in Tolkien's universe is not one, it's not a religious world explicitly. It's not one in which people are worshipping divinity, but there's this devotion to fellowship which comes through, and that's ultimately the strength that allows them to overcome unbelievable odds. So yeah, there's two directions I really want to pull through with this. One of them is how this spirit of the fellowship and the courage of the small in the face of the great, um, how that speaks to the liminal web, the wisdom commons, and the kind of hope for humanity as we head through this meta crisis, poly crisis moment, this kind of eye of the needle moment, in which a lot of people earnestly striving feel disempowered. A lot of people in the liminal web are asking, how do we scale this? How do we create a larger body? How do we create a church? Just want to welcome Ken. Good to have you here, my friend. We've just been delving into redemption and the courage of the small. And yeah, I'd love to have your remarks in a few moments when you're settled in and so on. Um, so I see in the liminal web as this sensibility that we need to scale, we need to find a way to create this kind of like army of the good, or we need to like figure out how to spread different ways of being and different consciousness throughout the population at large in order to overcome the juncture that we are facing. And yet in the Fellowship of the Ring, you see only 9 set out from Rivendell, only 9, small in number. And part of their strength seems to be actually that they are undetectable. Sauron doesn't suspect that the 9 would be threatening at all. The hobbits are able to slip under his gaze. And in the same way, I think a lot of the wisest and most spiritually powerful people in the liminal web, they're not seen as a threat to the powers that be by any measure. It's seen as like this obscure, meaningless thing. And that may well be precisely what gives it the power to move unseen. And I love this sense that the fellowship and the actors within the fellowship are able to make these small interventions that shift the tides of the age. They're able to steward the greater forces at play. And of course, there are greater forces. There's huge armies, there's huge battles, and they're kind of weaving their way through the tides of the age, just pushing things a bit that way, pushing things a bit this way. You see that in Gandalf as the wizard. You see that in Frodo appealing to Faramir's better nature to let him go forth, and so on. And so, at this juncture, I'd love to hear what comes up for you guys, as we kind of draw out the wisdom of Tolkien for our own time.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. It's good to see you all. I apologize for being a little bit late. Things have been a bit hectic in my life the last week, so I really appreciate your graciousness, and I'm very happy to be here. Um, Rennick, it's nice to see you. I haven't met you before. Um, and Mark, although your camera's off. Yeah, I guess to I'll just jump in here with this thread because Jordan, thank you for bringing in the music. Um, I Lord of the Rings for me is I don't know, maybe in some ways it's almost my one of my primary mythologies through which and by that I mean like story patterns through which I see reality. And I don't know that it landed to the depth it did until I heard the stories and understood the music of Iluvatar. That the metaphysics of Tolkien's universe is that God, Iluvatar, sings the universe into being. And he has the Ainur, these demigods, like you said, who are surrounding him and sort of amplifying the music. And there's this notion of this inner pure music that then gets amplified. And then Melkor's, because it's Melkor first who becomes Morgoth, but Melkor introduces the discord. It's called the Discord of Melkor. And then there's these the fallen angels around Melkor sort of pick up on his discord, and then there's I believe if I remember correctly, they stop singing. There's three different songs, and it happens in three consecutive. It's like the first song, Melkor introduced discord at the very end, and the second one is like some joining Melkor throughout in his discord, and then the third is like a lot of discord, and then the final is like one note only from Iluvatar of complete purity and perfection that ends the whole thing. Which for me is like, I mean, there's so much of just the Christian metaphysic is all throughout that. But then, like to connect that then to this notion that you brought in, Jacob, of the simple goodness being the answer, like in that we find ourselves caught up in these massive movements of history and these, this sort of cultural upheaval and upheaval of philosophy, upheaval of religion in this moment that we live in now. And it's Frodo and Sam, the weakest that survive on hope alone, right? Like Sam's speech in Minas Tirith with the right after the ring wraith, dusts them off the top of that little cross bridge, and you know uh, they roll down, and then or Sam tackles him down, and then Frodo comes up with the knife about to kill him, and he says, Sam goes through his speech, it's that in the great stories, that people people didn't give up. People didn't give up no matter what, because they had something they were holding on to. And then Frodo says, what are we holding on to, Sam? So that there's some good in this world and it's worth fighting for. And for me, Sam is the beating heart of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. And among everything else wonderful that Sam is he's sort of the essence of hope that that bears, that iconic end of the third movie where Sam says, I forget what the quote is exactly, but Sam picks up Frodo and carries him up the mountain. He says, I may not be able to carry the ring for you, but I can carry you. That's what it is. And he picks him up and he carries him up the mountain. It's like there does come that time when we are just the simple, because inevitably we are only ever simple. But we can do our best, and we can hope against hope, even when we're in the depths of Mordor. And there's something about the vision of the world that Tolkien saw that I think can give us hope no matter where we find ourselves in our personal lives, battling, say, dark spiritual forces, like we had talked about a week ago, or when we're looking at the big picture and unable to understand how could, you know, it's in Sam's speech, sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be good? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened?
That was beautiful, Ken. And I just need to jump in and highlight the additional Christic symbolism of Sam carrying Frodo up the mountain, because Jacob had pointed out the Christic figure of Frodo bearing the cross of the ring. But I love actually that Tolkien, it's kind of like a plot twist, like, but Frodo was not, in a sense, strong enough to just take the ring on his own. He needed a fellow brother in Christ, a fellow brother connected to that pure, simple good to bear his own cross, which was Frodo, carry Frodo up the mountain. And it also makes me think of that, line in Christianity, like, and when there were only one pair of footprints, I was carrying you. And yeah, there's just so much there, like pure goodness emanated in that symbolism. So